Let's talk now about the adrenal gland. And for the adrenal gland, it has two parts. It has the cortex and the medulla. So if I draw it like this, I will find two regions. There is the medulla, and then there is the cortex. The medulla is a neural tissue, whereas the cortex is a glandular tissue. And between the two regions, we're talking about 27 to 30 different hormones. But in general, the adrenal gland is one of the important glands in dealing with the stress. Maybe the most important gland when it comes to stress, whether it's like physical stress or whether it's psychological stress. So adrenal gland and its hormones are tailored toward reducing the stress in the body. So the cortex, we'll start with the cortex, is made out of three different areas. Each area has a kind of a different shape of cells. Those are the zona glomerulosa, then the zona fasciculata, and then the zona reticularis. So all of this is the cortex. Zona glomerulosa, those cells, the cells of this region, they are sitting like in a donut. So they're sitting in circles, okay? Usually there is a space inside them or between them, okay? So that's the zona glomerulosa. This is a very thin region of the adrenal cortex. Usually it's a very thin region. Now we will see it under microscope in the lab. From this region, we have a group of hormones called mineral corticoids. And as the name suggests, those are responsible for regulating mineral balance. And the main one is aldosterone. And we will see it, we will talk about it because it's a very important hormone in increasing the blood pressure. So that is the zona glomerulosa. Then the second region is the zona fasciculata. And here the cells are sitting in fascicles. So bundles of cells, but in elongated bundles. And also we will see them under microscope. Elongated bundles, so like fascicles. Okay? This is a thick region of the adrenal cortex. Here from this region we have a group of hormones called glucocorticoids. Glucocorticoids, and again from the name it means we are talking about the glucose. Usually the glucocorticoids would increase glucose levels in the blood. A classical example of them is cortisol and cortisone, and those are like very important stress hormones. Then the third region is the zona reticularis. Reticularis because the cells like fibers, they're sitting by themselves. There is no unique shape or format for the cells. They're like lines. Okay, and from this region we will talk about androgens. Those are the main hormones from this region. And for androgens, they will stimulate what we call muscularization. And this is something we'll talk about mainly to promote the secondary sex characteristics. Then we have the adrenal medulla, which is the inner part of the adrenal gland, and this would respond to the stresses. So this mainly would stimulate the sympathetic pathway, the fight or flight, in response to stress. And if you remember, this is from AB1, we have the two neurotransmitters, hormones, epinephrine, norepinephrine, or other names for them as adrenaline. Those are the major regulators of the stress, especially the fight or flight responses in our body. Okay, so let's talk in details about each one of those hormones and each one of those areas. So for the first one, the zona glomerulosa, we said that the main hormones or a group of hormones produced there are the mineral corticoids. Those are extremely important for the fluid and the electrolyte balance. This should remind you of ADH, and there is some overlap between the two. Aldosterone is the most important one among them, because this is responsible for regulating sodium and potassium ions in the blood, and therefore it's also responsible for the blood pressure. And of course, aldosterone is not by itself working to regulate the blood pressure. In fact, it's part of a mechanism or a system that is known as renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. The system is made out of the kidneys, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal gland, and targets several structures in our body to regulate the blood pressure. So how does it work? Let's go to the drawing. We have, in case of low blood pressure, the low blood pressure will be sensed by the kidney, and the kidneys, in response to that, would secrete a hormone called renin. Okay, so this is a hormone secreted by the kidney. This renin will go to the blood. In the blood, it will find another hormone coming from the liver. So this is the liver. The liver is secreting a hormone called angiotensin to the blood. And renin will convert it to angiotensin 1. Then another enzyme will convert it to angiotensin 2. Now, angiotensin 2 has several targets. One of them is the adrenal gland, where in the adrenal gland is the zona glomerulosa of adrenal cortex, and the zona glomerulosa will secrete aldosterone. Okay, aldosterone, what does it do? It targets the kidneys and asks them to reabsorb sodium ions from urine. Okay, and usually water follows. So always when we absorb sodium, water would follow and go back to the blood, and therefore increase blood volume. Okay, this is angiotensin. Angiotensin 2 also target the pituitary gland and ask it to release ADH. We know ADH will target the kidneys and therefore holds on urine or reabsorb water, which would increase the water volume. Okay, angiotensin 2 also will target the blood vessels, so it will cause constrictions of blood vessels, and this means that we will have narrower lumens of the blood vessels. So this is the lumen. Okay, it will be narrower upon angiotensin 2, which means there is less space available for the blood. Here there is more space for the blood, there is less space for the blood, and of course this would increase also the blood pressure. Okay, actually we can put it here, increase blood pressure, and those two would increase also the blood pressure by increasing the water volume in the blood. Okay, so this is the renin angiotensin aldosterone mechanism to regulate or increase the blood pressure. And this is one of the most important mechanisms of increasing the blood pressure in our body. For the zona vasculata, we have glucocorticoids. And those glucocorticoids would help in regulating glucose. Technically, they would increase the glucose levels. Okay, they will increase the glucose levels. The most important one is the cortisol, and the cortisol in the liver will get converted into cortisone. Now, the cortisol and the cortisone are for long-term stress. So think, for example, like someone is passing through difficult time, financial difficult time, or relationship difficult time. So their levels of cortisol or cortisone would increase over time. Okay, what's happening? This cortisol is doing is technically trying to provide sugar for the cells, to use sugar for energy. Okay, so it will break the polysaccharides, it will break proteins, it will break the triglycerides, all of them, and convert them to glucose so the cells can consume the sugar and trying to get better. Cortisone also would help to downregulate the immune system, because with the stress, usually there is inflammatory responses, there is inflammation. Inflammation, usually it's a bad thing. Most of the time it's a bad thing. So we don't want inflammatory responses. Therefore, we will try to reduce the immune system, to slow down the immune system, because usually the immune system will get activated with the inflammatory responses, and for wrong reasons sometimes it will enhance the inflammatory responses, which is something we don't want. For the zona reticularis, it produces a group of hormones called androgens. Those androgens, they perform two big functions. Those androgens, before maturation or before puberty, those would be responsible for the development of of the reproductive system. So in childhood, those will be important in developing the reproductive system organs like ovaries and testes. Now, those androgens will be converted under the influence of the pituitary gland. They will get converted into testosterone and estrogens. And those two hormones, we will see their effects. They will play major roles in both in males and females. In females, mainly after menopause, okay, after the end of the menstrual cycles. This will be the main source of estrogen in those women. Now, of course, the adrenal gland, since it's a big gland, it comes with certain problems or different types of problems. We will talk about the cortisol from the zona fasciculata. The hypersecretion of cortisol would lead to something called Cushing disease. This is usually a disease that would mean that always we have high glucose levels, and therefore we will start to accumulate lipids and fats in certain areas of the body. So it's highly associated with obesity. Sometimes this is coming because there is a problem in the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland is stimulating the production of cortisol from the adrenal gland. Sometimes also for those patients will develop something called moon face, that their face will be kind of inflamed, that they will lose the markings of their faces. Okay, that's the moon face. Sometimes, especially in women, they will have like a deposition of fat at the back of their neck as well. So all of those are like symptoms of Cushing disease. In case of hyposecretion, that is called Addison's disease. And here, although it's rare, but it will cause low blood glucose levels and low blood sodium levels. And this will, lead to weakness, pain, weight loss, nausea, vomiting, sweating, craving for salty foods. So all of those are symptoms of Addison disease. For the medulla, the main thing about it, as we said, it's for stress. And now it's not like long-term stress, no, it's for short-term stress. So this is like the sympathetic, the fight or flight, the sympathetic response. Think of you are feeling of certain danger or immediate danger. So that is the fight or flight response. So what will happen when we have epinephrine and norepinephrine, we will try to mobilize the body. We will try to increase, what will happen that we increase the glucose levels in the body, increase the production of ATP, right? So we can move the muscle. This also would lead to increase in the blood pressure, especially in the peripheral blood pressure in the limbs. So the person would be able to move away from the danger. So here, for example, those are like a general effects of the epinephrine, norepinephrine. It will talk to the liver and the skeletal muscle to break glycogen into glucose, increase the heart rate, increase pulses, increase blood pressure, dilates the airway to open more, to allow more air coming into the lungs. This will increase the oxygen levels, promote vasodilation to bring more, to allow more blood rushing into those areas. And to certain organs, it will cause vasoconstrictions because we don't want those organs during the fight or flight response. So both epinephrine and norepinephrine will perform the same thing, although like in different areas. So for example, the epinephrine will cause bronchial dilation, allowing more air, would allow blood flow to the skeletal muscles, whereas the norepinephrine would cause vasoconstrictions and increase the blood pressure in the peripheral organs. But again, remember, this is for short stress. It's usually like within seconds. If it turns out that the situation doesn't require like that much stress, the body would calm itself down. Okay, I will stop here. In the last video, we'll talk about the pineal gland, we'll talk about the thymus, and we'll talk about the pancreas.